Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Some of you for the first time, and some of you joining us here again for the Southern Oregon Black Community Police Forum number 2, titled Commitment. My name is Vance Beach. My pronouns are he, his, and him, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I'm the founder and director of BASE, which stands for Black Alliance and Social Empowerment here in Southern Oregon. We are a Black-led volunteer organization that centers, supports, and uplifts Black people for a true sense of culturally inclusive representation in all things that make community. We're so glad to be continuing forward with our conversations from our last forum with our local law enforcement leaders. My appreciation to Chief O'Mara, City of Ashland, Chief Clausen, City of Medford, Chief Allison, City of Central Point, and Sheriff Sickler, Jackson County, for their commitment to this process and support as we prepare for ways to help better assist our community together. I would also like to acknowledge how sincerely grateful I am to all of our community members who are here today. I know that together we will make a real change. Special thank you to our BASE team for taking the lead on this. Thank you to all other organizations and community members who helped to support. And I want to recognize some of our community organizations that are Black-led organizations: BPOC Sanctuary, So Equity, So Black, BOSA. It takes all of us to do what we're trying to do here. So I want to make sure that they are recognized. Now, before we go any further with this forum, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard about Aiden Ellison, the young teen who was shot and murdered. I was fortunate enough to speak with Aiden's mother on several occasions, which, trust me, was really tough conversations. I remember on our phone call, as I listened to her speak about her child, her son, and his life, I remember simple statements like he was a good spirit and a kind soul. I also remember her saying Aiden has never been arrested. He's a good kid, but he would also never call the police because he didn't trust police officers. Or even more drastic things like he came back to Ashland to escape hate crimes that his family was already experiencing. I remember just saying, your son will not be forgotten and our community is here for you. At Aiden's mother's request, she wanted me to make sure that her son is not forgotten and that he is shared. And if there's anything we can do to make things better going forward, we all need to do it. At this time, before we go any further with this forum, we will hold a moment of silence in recognition of Aiden and his family. Please note the picture you're going to see is what his mother wants you all to see. Thank you. Aiden really does represent all of us because that kind of senseless murder could have happened to any one of us. Our safety is very, very important, and Aiden should not be forgotten. So at this time, I will actually ask each officer, when called upon, to please say Aiden Ellison will not be forgotten. Chief Allison.
Aiden Ellison will not be forgotten.
Thank you. Sheriff Sickler.
Aiden Ellison will not be forgotten.
Thank you. Chief Clausen.
Aiden Ellison will not be forgotten.
And Chief O'Mara.
Aiden Ellison will not be forgotten.
Appreciate that. Thank you all so much. Okay, let's get into this forum. Please note that tonight, this is a Black-centered space where we are centering the voices, experiences, and needs of our Black community. And we are respectfully asking that if you are non-Black, that you concede this space. We're very appreciative of everyone who's joined us this evening, but we're asking that if you are non-Black, that you take a step back and we'd appreciate if your support for just tonight is nonverbal. However, please feel free to respond and comment in the chat box, but at this time, we want to amplify the voices of the Black community. A couple of notes on the Zoom etiquette for this evening. We're asking that you remain muted until we have the open forum section, where we will allow for deeper conversations between the panelists and the community. At all times, you are welcome to respond in the chat box to anything that you are feeling. Please do be respectful and refrain from any name calling during this forum. This is a respectful forum where our goal is to work towards solutions, not insults. If you happen to be disrespectful, we will give you a warning, and after that, you will be dismissed. Also, feel free to use the reaction buttons during this forum as you need. So, to recap and give you some context for tonight, I would like to preface this meeting again with stating that racism is very much a part of our everyday interactions and can be found in nearly every institution. We know that policing is merely just the icing on this triple layer cake of anti-Blackness, where educationally, economically, and politically we are stifled. Our inclusion and representation is not felt. However, if we do not feel safe by sworn-in safety people, then it becomes pretty hard to take on anything else. It literally comes down to being alive to do so. Race continues to influence how Black people in the United States are treated by law enforcement. Specifically, here in Oregon, disproportionate statistics can be found in the prison population, physical harm or killings of Black people, traffic stops, harassment, or arrest. This is why in our last forum, it was so crucial to further emphasize the biases, harassments, and the unease with police officers we have in our own community. But now we need to be very, very clear on what racism is and its specifics to Black people. It's not an individual character flaw, nor a personal moral failing, nor a psychiatric illness, so it doesn't matter if you have good people or you hire Black people. It's a system consisting of structures, policies, practices, and norms that structures opportunity and assigns value based on phenotype or the way people look. It unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities. But specifically, when we speak about anti-Blackness in this space as being a two-part formation that both strips Blackness of value, dehumanizes, and systematically marginalizes Black people, this form of anti-Blackness is overt. Beneath this anti-Black racism is the covert, structural, and systemic racism, which predetermines the socioeconomic status of Blacks in this country and is held in place by anti-Black policies, institutions, and ideologies. Policing is merely just one. In other words, if we want real change that is sustainable, we not only have to be educated on this topic, but we literally have to interrupt the flow of the racist system. In our previous forum, we were very successful in getting commitments from each law enforcement leader as pertains to cultural agility training, accountability and reporting on departments and/or other officers that demonstrate bias or prejudice acts, and lastly, community oversight through liaisons who are not officers, but ultimately work in the best interests of this Black community. This was all a very important first step. However, it is the community oversight that we are further advancing on today. As I've mentioned earlier by not only Aiden's mother, but as well as what you've heard in the previous forum, if you got a chance to see it, there is a huge trust issue amongst this community and policing. We need to improve the transparency in racial issues. We need a better connection for safety. We need an improvement in statistics, reporting, hate crimes, crime victim calls, calls for service, support for unjust law enforcement activities, assurance of proper and impactful training. We need strong community oversight presence. Our goal today is to receive a commitment from each of the departments and get full support and cooperation in the creation of highly qualified professional community liaisons to identify projects and areas where they can be helpful in improving racial issues, to also allow the liaisons to play a substantial role in the formation of policy for ultimately supporting the goal of creating an anti-racist culture within the departments and the community at large. Our base team and advisors have worked endlessly to find ways in which the potential idea of these positions can be full-time paid positions by our committee, working specifically on behalf of the Black community. And we have found those options. But before we can go any further with the qualifications and the development of the liaisons, we do have to have more questions. Obviously, our community has been through a lot lately. We do want to share more experiences for understanding and awareness, but overall, we need to ensure there is a commitment to full transparency, improving racial issues for this community, however that needs to be done right now. So let's get into the agenda for tonight, folks. Just a reminder to everyone, remain muted until the open forum section. Also, please remember this is a Black space where we are wanting to amplify the voices of the Black community. Our agenda is as follows. We had our welcoming. We will move next into community testimonials, where you'll hear from some community members that want to share their stories or experiences. We will then go into police panel, where we've collected questions from the community. And then we will have an open forum. This is the section where you will be able to respond, make statements, or ask additional questions to the panelists we have here today. And then we will go into our closing. So, moving right ahead into the first part of our forum, we will have a shared testimony from a few of our community members. I believe we will start things off with Dominique.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so for my testimony, it was 4 years ago that my grandmother was arrested by Medford police. She was on her way, on her day off, to drop off sweet potato pies to her coworkers, who at the time, she worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs in White City, Oregon. So on her day off during the holiday season, she drove up to drop off the food. And by the time that she got back, I was already home from school. When she got home, and also this is pertinent to the story, she lived on Thomas Road in Medford, Oregon. So I was already home when she got there. And in that time, she drank the rest of the peach vodka in the house. She then poured herself a full glass of wine before we ended up getting a knock on the door. At the time, we didn't know that it was the Medford police. So she just simply said, "Come in." So Medford police opened the door and they asked if she had been drinking, which my grandmother, not knowing what it was that they were really there for, just sarcastically said no and drank the wine that was in her hand. So then they're asking her to step outside to do this, to do the sobriety test. She, of course, fails. And next thing I know, my grandmother is getting put behind a squad car. And I honestly could not believe that it was actually possible to get a DUI from your living room. So the context of what happened, there was a disgruntled veteran who lived at the VA, and he took my grandmother's license plates and reported them. His testimony, because this did go to court, was that he did not know my grandmother prior. So when I went up to testify, I said that I recognized the guy that reported my grandmother's plates, because I used to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs when I went to South Medford High School. And he definitely looked familiar. So then in the courtroom, I told them what happened. And then the testimony was that my grandmother, in the midst of holiday traffic, was drunk driving, going 80 miles an hour from White City to Medford, miraculously without getting arrested by a sheriff, and managed to park her car perfectly at her cabin on Thomas Road. And after I gave my testimony the first time, after listening to what the cop was saying, he got up and touched me on my shoulder as he left. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really like it when the person that kidnapped my grandmother touches me.
Thank you so much, Dominique. Yeah, that is a very interesting story. Okay, we will move ahead to our next community member who would like to share their experience. Whitney.
Hi everyone, how y'all doing? I hope that everyone is well. Okay, so to live as an American citizen with the luxuries of freedom often seem like a dream, and yet I continue to believe that in my Black body, female, identified at birth, and queer, I deserve such freedoms. Hello, my name is Whitney Reed. I have been a resident of the Rogue Valley since April 2018, and I want to acknowledge that this practice of reading this testimony itself is demeaning and shows that our trauma must be displayed in front of others for those in leadership to validate our experience, as though the historical context of my presence as a Black citizen of the Valley has no bearing on the request for a safe and welcoming city for Black and brown bodies once discriminated from living in this city, where the KKK once marched down Main Street, where Brick Room, Taquiero, Picaro, and the Chamber of Commerce now reside. After being offered a position at the largest regional theater in the United States of America, I knew that I would come to a small town around 22,000 people, which was predominantly white. That didn't bother me at all. I knew coming from a larger, more diverse city that there would be shifts in the way that I behaved due to the countless small, predominantly white cities that actors, artists, and artistic administrative professionals of color often have lived in to progress their careers. Founded in 1935, the historic Works Progress Administrative Federal Theater Project, which is also known as the WPA, which coincidentally aligns with the founding of Oregon Shakespeare Festival, was a part of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal strategy, which was funded by the American government for the unemployed theater professionals affected by the Great Depression, which uplifted what became known as regional theaters, which were historically placed in sundown towns, which are areas nearly 100% white population, which previously gave white people specifically of the region, jobs to stimulate the local economy. So please keep in mind that in 1935, my ancestors were being forced into sharecropping, leaving the South through the Great Migration, and becoming casualties of the Jim Crow South. But as time has passed and the field has become more open to BIPOC folk, there's been a push to diversify the field. Through time, organizations like OSF have led the way to accomplishing the goal, not only on stage, but behind stage, in the boardroom, and now in the highest position of the organization. I am here to share my experience with you to give the Ashland Police Department and other departments and surrounding departments a clear depiction of the work that must be done to fill the gaps that penalize Blackness for daring to access true freedom in this region. I work late. One night after working late, I wasn't ready to go home. I decided to climb into my small Chevy Spark electric vehicle, drive down to the light at Lithia and Pioneer, take a left on Lithia, drive to Weimar, left on Weimar, and head towards a scenic route where the lights of the town sparkle just right. As many who have like electric vehicles, also known as EVs, know, sometimes in order to go up the hill, you might have to give it a little bit more power than you do the average gas vehicle. And as I approached the spot and was making a right onto the street where I would often use as my space for like midnight prayer meditation, I saw a police vehicle behind me, but I paid no attention because as people in the South say, I understand that I am covered by the blood of Jesus. So I turned into the spot overlooking the town that we all speak so highly of, and I spent about 25 or 30 minutes giving gratitude, meditating, and praying. I turned around, I took a left to drive back down the hill, and by the time less than 200 feet from turning right to head back on Main Street, I see a cop car with its flashing lights behind me. I turn off my music, I turn on my lights, I push the power down button and wait for the officer's arrival to my driver's side door. And when he approached me, he asked if I knew why he had stopped me. And of course I said no. He said that he had followed me prior and I was previously speeding. I told him about the electric vehicle, which I would have never purchased if I didn't, live in Ashland, but, when in Rome. Anyway, he said, you were speeding. I said, okay, so you're saying that I was speeding 30 minutes ago. So now what? He asked me if we had a problem. I told him I'm not sure what he meant. The pace of our speech became faster and faster. And through my interactions with many Ashland yogis, I've learned that it is the slowing down of the breath that gives us clarity. So I swallowed what little I knew about the law and my consistent belief that I am just like everyone else, and remembered my place as a Black femme. I remembered that I am my mother's only daughter, and that my goal was to come to gain skills that would take me to the next location, not to arrive in front of my grandmother in a body bag. So I told him, no, we don't have a problem. He talked to me about speeding laws and then told me that he would let me go with a warning. And I did cry all the way home. So as my 5 minutes come to a close, probably over 5 now, I just want to acknowledge that this wasn't the only time that I had more interactions in my very distinguishable car with the same officer. I would be pulled over after leaving work late nights on 2 to 3 other occasions, also happening within the span of 2 months. All stops resulting in a warning and feeling like harassment. I'm speaking up because many Black bodies in this town police ourselves. Music never too loud, careful not to jaywalk, party, but not partying as hard as the other people in the bar, because their consumption may lead to them having an inappropriate conversation with you about race, and then you'd have to be the mature, graceful, and docile facilitator on your night off. But we are here, and we are falling within the historical context of this town's growth and ascension from lawful racism. And so are you. So what can you do to rectify these historic gaps in our access to freedom?
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much. And I hope that that was somewhat got through, because it definitely resonated with me and probably many others. Thank you, Whitney. Next, we'll have Lichelle.
Okay, hi everybody. I am just like, my experience that I'm sharing is not the worst thing that's happened to me as far as like dealing with the police, but since it hasn't been in any of the departments that are here, I'm just going to skip over that and kind of go into one that did. I had on 2 separate occasions in about as many months, my car was broken into, and then that car ended up getting totaled later because someone stole it. And then I had got a new car and the window smashed in, all over from, about August or July to the end of August, September time. And so my only issue is I never ever got any follow-up on anything that I did try and talk to the police about. There was no follow-up. And as like somebody in the community, I think that follow-up should be something that we get, because it's hard to end up trusting the police to, actually follow through with what they say they're going to do. Because I was told someone would come out and talk to me, and that had never happened. I was told that, I'd get an update at some point, but then never got one. And this is months later now. And so I guess my experience more just has to do with how follow through could actually change a lot for us as a community.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to just acknowledge that, sharing your experiences is something that is, it's tough in itself. I know personally when I relived mine, it was very tough. So I appreciate all of you, and thank you so much for your testimonials today. Okay, we need to move forward. We have next our police panel discussion. We're now getting ready to go into this. We have collected questions that community members came up with that we would like to ask the police officers. How this will work is each officer will have 90 seconds to respond. This will allow us to get through as many questions as possible. So let's go ahead and get started with that process now. Okay, so these are questions that, again, that our community members came up with. We'll break them out into sections. This first section is questions as a follow-up, as we're seeing is very important, a follow-up from our last forum. You all heard a lot of experiences before, probably got an understanding of things you may have not known before. So the first question here, as a follow-up from our last forum, is what have you learned from the last forum, and what outcome do you want out of today's meeting? We'll go ahead and start with Sheriff Sickler.
Well, thanks for being here and allowing this opportunity to Vance and Base and everyone that set this up and all the community members. I think the last forum, I was able to take away that, people have experiences that I'm unaware of in our community, and that, even though we asked to be made aware of these things, that there may be hesitation to come forward and talk to the law enforcement about the experiences or the treatment that individuals receive. And what I kind of glean from that is that we need to really work on this to build trust and to build confidence in all of our community members so that people feel comfortable. I also, took away that obviously we have a lot of work to do in our valley to make sure everybody feels included and safe, and, work on our own profession. Vance, could you tell me, repeat the second part of that question as well for me?
Yeah, sure. What do you want out of today's meeting?
Today, I think, again, the opportunity to further hear from the community, the Black community, to let people know that we are serious as a law enforcement group in the community about investing into all community members and having a valley where everyone feels safe, not only from crime, but from officials or from, law enforcement. So for me, this is another step in a long process, I think. I don't think there's a simple, fix. Nothing can be said tonight, I don't think, that can make everybody feel comfortable or build trust overnight, but this is just one more kind of step forward. And I think we need to just continue the conversations and be committed to what we've talked about tonight and in our previous meeting, and the conversations that we've had offline about diversity training with, you, Vance, or others, Hilda, and just continuing to move forward. So
thank you very much for that. Chief Clausen.
Yeah, well, good evening. Thank you, Vance, and thank you all for being here. I think the biggest takeaway for me after the last forum was, for one, I got to hear your story and several other stories about the feeling that they have in our community. And I think it was really important to hear those perspectives and to take back to my folks just some of the experiences that you feeling. So that's been the biggest takeaway from that last meeting. I think just going forward, I love the fact that from day one, we're just continuing to and having connections. I think that's really important for law enforcement heads here regionally and the sheriff. We need to have those connections and to be able to build relationships. And like you and I were talking about last week, Vance, it's when an issue comes up, it's nice to know somebody and know a face and know a name that you can trust so that you can deal with an issue that you otherwise do. And I just appreciate you guys being here and for Base and for providing that opportunity for us to be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Chief Clausen. Chief Ty, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Vance. Good to see you and everybody else. Thanks for the opportunity at the continued engagement. Especially after the murder of Aiden, and I know that that is not something that we talked about at the last meeting, but I'm really seeing how much pain everybody is in. And Vance, you and I, with Teresa, talked about that a little bit a week or so ago. All of this is, I've known that systemic racism exists for a long time, but I've never had such clarity that we all need to be more sensitive about it. We all need to be more aware of it, and we cannot brush it off as that's not my issue to deal with. It's not something I see in my agency. I'm seeing more and more that it is everybody's issue, and we all need to take ownership of it. And much like Chief Clausen and Sheriff Sickler said, I'm really looking forward to continuing to build mutual understanding between the police department and the BIPOC community. And I'm looking forward to continuing the exploration of this advocacy liaison component that can help bridge that gap.
Thank you for that. Chief Allison.
Hello, everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me right now. Vance, can you give me okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. They're very important and I appreciate it. And I know how difficult it is to share those experiences. So thank you for doing that. The answer to your question is I learned so much from the last now 2 forums that we've been involved in, and I'm going to keep mine. My other part is very short, is how much I have to learn and how much as a community we want to come together. So that's the takeaway from the other 2, and just continuing to grow all of us as a community.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving along to our next question that is also a follow-up from the last forum. In our last forum, you all stated you wanted to create an anti-racist culture for your departments that branch out into all areas of the community. I know with our organization, that's very extensive work politically, educationally, economically, and socially. That would include changes in policy, institutional structures, practices, and norms. What does that look like for you all in your departments? We will go ahead and start off with Chief Clausen.
There we go. So we have established a citywide diversity committee, and so we're starting there. As I mentioned, this goes outside of just the police department. So we've established this committee to begin looking at all of our policies, and that will trickle down into who we hire, the type of people we hire, the kind of language we use for hiring process, and how we even treat our own employees. And then it extends out from that, and it will marry that into our own policies and practices. We are a lexipol agency, as I think the other 2 chiefs and sheriff are also. So we're always getting new updates, legal updates, best practices as the Oregon legislature makes changes up in Salem. We get those updates as well. So we're, aside from policy and establishing committees, just continuing to be in listening mode and learning and doing the best we can.
Thank you. And there was a question if we will be able to know who is on these committees. Just for you, Chief Clausen. Just yes or no. Something we can.
Probably the most notable is the cultural diversity committee that you at that base actually is going to be a part of now. So I don't have all the names in front of me. You might actually have better access to those names yourself.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so something that the community will be aware of then is I think what we need to make sure we know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving that same question over to Chief Ty.
Thanks, Vance. Like Scott said, we're all Lexipol agencies, which means we're all following national best practices that are informed quite well. Having said that, I am, like my partner, is all about transparency. We put our policy manual online for everybody to scrutinize and make sure we were following our own rules. I welcome this growing relationship with the liaison to weigh in on those policies and see where adjustments need to be made. And like my partner agencies, we're trying to stay on top of the legislative changes. Like one, for example, that we recently trained our officers on, and this might be a news, maybe not, but maybe it's news for some people, that under a new Oregon statute, a bias incident, not a bias crime, but a bias incident in which a person feels harassed, et cetera, because of their race, et cetera, the police are mandated to refer that person to a bias incident hotline, a statewide hotline that's going to track and map all of those incidents. So I'm glad that we're keeping up with that legislation. I think it's a great new tool, and we look forward to any other ways that we can make ourselves most transparent and accountable to the entire community.
Okay. Same question to Sheriff Sickler. And again, just to restate again, it's what does creating an anti-racist culture look like for you?
Well, I think for me and my staff, it starts at the top. So me, I've firmly believe that in the community, all police officers have a leadership role, or sheriff's deputies, and how they conduct themselves, the things that they're trained on, and the way they interact with the public sets an example for the other public. So when we talk about how do we foster change in other areas of the community, it starts at the top. And for me, having gone to training and continuing to educate myself in some of these issues, and then to educate my staff and to really become more aware of issues that I was not even aware of just a few years ago, and things that were not necessarily taught in schools or other places about systemic racism and biases and all of those things. I think for me, that's the most impact that I can have as a leader is to set our people up to be successful and to then set a good example for our community. And again, with the policies, we're all in the same policy manuals. All of our policies are very similar with some small nuances. So I do believe our policies are in line with best practice, but that's just one piece. It starts at the recruitment, it starts at the hiring processes, the backgrounds, the psychological exams, trying to ferret out issues before they even come into the organization, and then training your people. And
Sheriff Sickler, we'll have to cut you off there just for the sake of time. Chief Allison, how about you?
So answering the question is, it's something that you have to work on every day. It's something that as a leader, as an officer, as a frontline staff, as someone who is at our front desk contacting employees, it's something that we work on every day. And it's also about our department having to be uncomfortable sometimes and really embracing what is uncomfortable and hearing things that are uncomfortable. I think that is kind of where we start. There's a lot of the other chiefs and sheriff has talked about other things, but it is really doing that deep dive and looking within ourselves and making sure we're doing what we say. Talking about policies, we've all talked that we do use essentially a variation of the same policy, but it's also the practices that not only is it there a policy, but we're practicing what our policy is and supervising that, making sure that resonates throughout our department and checking it. So those are the things how we start.
Okay. All right, and going into our next question and last follow-up question from the previous forum, and I heard some of you say you did go back to your departments and share what you learned, but specifically, did you share with your departments what you heard from the last forum directly pertaining to stops? If yes, what did you specifically learn from speaking to your officers? We'll go ahead and start that off with Chief Allison.
So yes, I did have conversations after our forum with not only my command staff, with my officers, and just actually conversations in the community. I think one of my city councilors is actually on this forum today. What did I learn from my officers? I posed the questions a little bit different as I shared the stories as I could recount them, is that especially with Vance and Keith's stories, is that without making any excuses, explain to me how this occurs. And there, with every officer I spoke with, there was silence. And that's kind of where that response was. So I think it was challenging for them. I think it's challenging to have the conversations. And that's kind of where it is, and making sure that we're monitoring what we do out there. And it's difficult with stories or accounts. That's why I think they're so impactful. And while at some point I will be asking individuals when we are out of this COVID area to actually come and do some of those accounts if they would like to, because I think it's incredibly powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. Chief Clausen.
Yeah, so it actually, can you hear me? Okay. It stimulated quite a bit of conversation among my command staff. And I had shared the stories that we heard from you and I believe Keith. And it was really insightful to be able to walk our way through those and discuss those. And we see it from one perspective and you see it from a totally different perspective. And it was really powerful to be able to share that with my folks. So they took that back to their staff and shared it in their briefings. And then the other thing, I ended up meeting with our training coordinator, and we're setting up our bias-based policing for next year. So we're already starting on that, a more engaging process. I know that we've been having conversations with you about what that content looks like. So I'm excited to see what happens next. But just to answer your question, it really brought forth some conversations for our staff members.
Great. Chief O'Mara?
Yeah, like Scott and Chris, there have been some good conversations, and those conversations are continuing. I don't think they're ever stopping. I did, by the way, meet with Keith after the last meeting and had a really good conversation with him. And I'm not going to take the liberty of saying that we're best friends or anything, but I think that we've got the start of a good ongoing dialogue going. The takeaway from my conversations that I have is that it's complicated. You know, I in particular have a lot of young officers, and how do I get these young officers to walk the line between being overly eager to stop people? One of the things that I've been trying to push out gently so walls of defense don't go up is that we should not stop people because we can. We should stop people because we need to. Not, oh, I get to stop this person, but I should really stop this person. I should really have this contact. And that's an ongoing conversation, especially for the younger officers that are there. Mostly they do a really good job. Sometimes they're a little bit overly eager. And so we're trying to navigate that distinction between what I can do and what I should do.
Perfect. Sheriff Sickler?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to just talk with my whole department on a department-wide level, but we did talk and our command staff about the forum and the continued forum and the training that we're going to be doing as far as, and I talked with Hill about how do we incorporate some of the local, like the stories and the testimonials into that training so it's here locally for our staff. So I think that will be a goal of what we try to do when we do that for our department and early next year. But yeah, it just certainly generates conversations and thoughts, things that we don't normally would think of as officers, because I do think Ty hit it on the head, and Chief, sometimes officers don't see it the same way. They just think they're out doing their job and they don't understand that somebody who has been stopped multiple times and that they have perceptions about certain things. And so, that's something that I don't think people are very conscious of in law enforcement. And this is why the training, I think, is so crucial to help understand both sides of the coin when they're out there doing the job. And there's that balance like Ty had talked about. So.
Okay. Thank you all for that. Moving actually along, speaking of training, going into a training section here, there was a question brought up. Do you provide cultural agility training for everyone in your department, sworn in and unsworn in personnel, for example, dispatchers, administration folks, etc.? This could be a yes or no or elaborate. We'll go ahead and start with Chief Clausen on that.
I can speak for my civilian record staff, my support staff, and then all sworn do get that cultural agility training. That part of it is included in our annual training, and we're just one of those departments that have always included our civilian staff. I can't speak for dispatch because they're an entity on its own. I don't manage our dispatch center, but as far as the Medford Police Department is concerned, they do.
Who manages dispatch? Who manages dispatch?
ECSO is a third party. We contract with all of our police agencies, contract with our 911 center. So they have their own management structure. We are all board members of that as law enforcement heads. So we have a lot of influence there, but they're their own entity.
So definitely an area though that can be influenced into cultural agility training in some way, capacity, if it's something you're a part of, obviously. Yeah. Okay. How about Chief O'Mara?
Yeah, everybody at the Ashland Police Department goes through implicit bias and procedural justice training. And we were actually asked to sit on a statewide work group to redefine the basic police academy curriculum. There's one police academy, it's in Salem. And we, albeit one voice, but I was proud that we were invited to participate in that to help redefine the basic police curriculum to include cultural agility, emotional intelligence, implicit bias, procedural justice, not as afterthoughts loaded on top of the traditional stuff, but as first 2-3 weeks foundational stuff so that the other stuff can be built on top of that. And so that's actually part of basic training for every police officer in the state of Oregon going forward.
Chief Allison?
Yes, so all of my staff does receive the same types of training that has been discussed prior. I do believe in the next 6 months, we are going to really reevaluate a lot of our training. While I think the academy is going to have a good building block, I think when it's internal and what you are training within is the most important. We're meeting and designing a program with Mike and Emily Green, and we're having continual dialogue to hopefully design something that will be able to be utilized not only for our department, but for others. That's something that we're looking towards, but we have been training that way for many years. On a little side note for dispatch, dispatch is managed by an executive director, and I definitely feel that that she either has or probably is going to be training, and it's conversations that also need to be included.
Okay, thank you. Sheriff Sickler?
Yeah, so we annually do training on implicit bias, and then we've also done training for our staff. And we do have turnover, so not everybody has gone through all of the training sessions. But fair and impartial policing, implicit bias, procedural justice, anti-racism training for some. I mean, we've covered quite a gamut of those types of trainings. And again, it is annual for the implicit bias. And then we also do our ethics training yearly, which is a 3-hour block of ethics training, and then 3 hours of leadership. And when I talk about why is that important, because that goes into some of these things about having courage to do what's right and to say something if you see something that's wrong, and really instilling the ethical fortitude and the courage to stand up and always do what's right. So those trainings I think are important when we do that yearly, every year. And of course, as we talked about, we're committed to building a curriculum of cultural agility with Hilda, specifically for law enforcement moving forward. And we hope to roll that out in 2021. So
just to clarify, everybody in the department does not do the training though?
No, everybody does. I don't know about our record staff, to be completely honest with you, if they get the same. I'd have to look. All the sworn staff, all of the deputies on the road do the implicit bias. Our record staff has done the ethics training and the leadership training and some of the other things.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. Let's move along to crimes. Nope. We're still in questions here. In cases, okay, so it's kind of obviously something just came up in our community that was pretty tragic. So in cases where the victims are people of color, do you have trained officers to review the bias behind it? If yes, where are those officers trained, and are they immediately assigned in cases like that of Aiden? And we'll go ahead and give it to Chief O'Mara.
Sure. There might be such a thing as a specifically bias trained officer. We don't have anyone that I'm aware of that's specifically trained in that arena. I'm open to examining that. Every police officer, having said that, every police officer learns the law and learns the criminal statutes and knows to look out for demonstrable cases of bias crimes occurring. And I fully respect the anger and the furor, the tension, the passion that has come up over the murder of Mr. Ellison. And I think that there is a very legitimate conversation to be had surrounding whether or not the suspect's implicit biases or anything going on inside his head had something to do with his decision making. I've got my own opinions about that. I should say it's easy for me to imagine that it did, because Black people, especially young Black men, are seen as criminalized and more dangerous by our society. But in the end, as of yet, that motive has not been demonstrated. And so, no, we don't have anybody that is specifically trained, other than all police officers are trained to look for that demonstrable element that can be pointed to as a motive for a crime.
I'm assuming that that's probably the same, perhaps, response from the rest of the panel. So what I'd like to ask then is, what evidence would confirm biases as the motivation in cases where the victims are people of color? And I'll let anybody who feels like they have a good answer for that one jump in.
Well, I'll just continue, because this has been on my plate for the last few weeks. Anything that the district attorney's office can point to, if there's an utterance, if there's an association with extremist groups, anything can lend itself to substantiating that bias. And again, specifically in Aiden's case, we have looked for that. We have engaged the FBI to look for that. Nothing has come up yet, but we're still looking. But there has to be something overt that, you know, is presentable as evidence in court that said not only did this crime happen, but we have a good reason to tie it back to this set of beliefs that the suspect has, or this association, or some utterance, some words that were said while the altercation was taking place. But there's got to be something substantial, you know, something, I mean, substantive, something tangible that can really lend itself to that.
Does anybody have anything to add to that? I'm looking for specific evidence that would confirm such thing. Is there an example? I'd like to hear. Chris?
So Van, coming from a detective standpoint, I think some of the questions that you're eliciting is, I think that in criminal investigations, and I'm not going to use Ashland, I'm not familiar with the case at all, but what I would say is that as a detective, you're going to potentially look at social media posts. You're going to look at biases within there. You're going to look at if there's any evidence of associations with hate groups, kind of like what Chief O'Mara had mentioned. But you're going to tie that all together and make a case book and see what kind of dispositions this individual had, and then present to a district attorney. They ultimately make the decision for charging, but I think if you're asking for specific evidence, those would be the roads. And right now, social media is what is so prevalent in our society. So that's going to be your first place you're going to go.
Okay. That makes sense. So a little bit of a different question here then. If we do have confirmed biases, obviously that are directly impactful to this community in particular, how does your department intend on implementing or reporting bias crime statistics for the community? I'll let any one of you address that. Is that something that is being done, or is that something that can be done?
Yeah, I think I'll just take a step. So we're obligated to report crimes, hate crimes, to the state. And so if we get reports of those investigations, arrests, we have to report that to the state. So I believe that information, and maybe one of the chiefs has better knowledge on that system, but I believe that information is accessible to the public through that venue. And then, you know, departments can certainly, different departments have means of putting out information at the end of the year through like an annual report, or, you know, some other means of communicating to the public. And sometimes those things will consist of arrest stats or other things. And that number could be, you know, reported to the public that way. But I think to get the full state perspective on all the numbers, you'd have to go to the state agency. I think it's the Department of Justice.
You know, thank you for that, Sheriff. When you say that, I was thinking about the STOP program that is also provided by the state. It seems that a lot of the state systems are very difficult to access. And so I guess my follow-up to that would be, is there an opportunity or possibility that some of these statistics can actually be placed on your individual sites for community easy access?
Vance, I can talk with that. I think it definitely can happen. I do think that the state's reporting method, talking what the sheriff was saying, is that there is reporting for hate crimes and for bias-based complaints that we give to the Oregon Criminal Justice Committee that's monitored by the Department of Justice. And it's very difficult and it's clunky, and the STOP program for us hasn't been as fruitful as I was hoping or as easy to mine information out of. So that's something that I definitely think each department could do that. I'll speak only to mine. That would be something I would be interested in looking at and having a transparent way, potentially with this new liaison position. That would be something that they maybe could mine that information from within our department.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to another question here before we end off. There's a lot of things developing in the chat, so I want to make sure folks have time to ask you questions personally. Okay, so with all that said on biases and different things that are impactful specifically to this community, what services or follow-up do you have for people of color that are victims of crimes involving discrimination, bias, or potential harassment from your own officers? What services are we providing, or what are you all doing in those instances? I'll let anybody jump out on that one.
Vance, I'll just jump in and weigh in on this one. So we are essentially fact finders at the police officer level. We will put together the entire case, witness statements, survivor or victim statements. We'll interview suspects. We'll put together the whole package, and then we send that off to the DA's office, where they will the charging body. At that level and at the court level, they have services, advocacy services available for folks who have become victims and are now survivors of those crimes. So I think that the right off the bat, the first thing is just training officers to be sympathetic, empathetic, to be good fact finders, to in the way of their investigations. That's the start. And then from there, there's a lot of services, especially with the DA's office in the county, to offer supportive services. And just to answer, just kind of a follow-up to your last little part of that question, when someone feels threatened or harassed by one of my own, I want to know about that. And we have a very transparent policy. You can call, you can email, you don't have to give your name. It can be anonymous. It can be through any means. Years ago, we used to make some.
I have to cut you there, Clausen. Chief Clausen, we're running out of time on that one, but sounds to me like probably a good area for the liaison to help out. It's unlikely. I know in my particular case that I would be following up with the police department after feeling harassed by police officers. So hopefully that's, one area that we can expand on. Okay, I do want to move into our last set of questions here before we go into the open forum. You all committed and have been talking about, the creation of the liaison, and you committed to that in the last forum, which seems to be very beneficial for this community. As we work towards improving transparency of racial issues through community liaisons, can we count on all of your departments to work with our liaisons in the formation of policy for the goal of creating an anti-racist culture, and to be fully transparent with our liaisons in regards to any statistics, any reportings of officers, trainings, hate crimes, or biases? This could simply be a yes or no, an elaboration, but it could be a very simple answer. We'll start off with Chief Allison.
Yes.
Thank you. Chief Omer?
Yes.
Chief Clausen?
Yes.
Great. Sheriff Sickler?
Yes.
That is amazing. Great. Well, we will, that's great. So let me ask you this as a follow-up. In the cases that there may be a resistant officer, including lieutenants, sergeants, etc., To ensure transparency, for example, can we count on there being documentation shared with the liaison and submitted in their files that state lack of support and or misconduct towards the liaison for community awareness? We'll start off with Chief Allison.
So, well, yes, that it's kind of interesting because this is probably one of the benefits of having a very top-down militaristic type of a organization in this sense, is that when we give training and we're rolling it out, we don't anticipate there'll be a lot of resistance to that. That being said, we know that there could be, and yes, we definitely would share that information, and then also have discussions of why that's existing. One of the things, though, that I want to highlight is through this process, just as maybe what you have seen with us, I'm hoping, is that there's also going to be a learning piece and a building of relationships with our officers. So that's also going to come with this liaison position, and I do think that that will also build upon the if there were any resistance.
Okay. How about the rest of your officers? If any resistance, can we count on documentation so this community is well aware of it?
Vance, I don't know if that was a follow-up for Chief Allison, but I would like to jump in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to say enthusiastically yes, but I think we also need to realize that the four of us are not omnipotent, and there are likely union matters, contractual matters that need to be respected. There are personnel file privacy issues that need to be respected. And so my answer, my affirmation is yes, 100%, as much as I can and as much as it is in my control. And that is not within my control, I will work in conjunction with the liaison to try to navigate it. So I want to say yes, just with a little asterisk that there might be some hiccups along the way.
Okay. Is that the same for everyone else, or?
Yeah, I think Ty kind of covered the aspects. There's a lot of things that, go into that question. So yes, but there are also other rules, procedures, contracts, and things that need to be adhered to, labor law issues and things of that nature. And then I just want to remind everybody that if somebody is, blatantly, or even not even blatantly, but there's evidence of bias practices or behaviors or racist behaviors by an officer, there are remedies for that in place. In fact, there's things that have to be done to report that individual to the DA's office, and their credibility as a witness could come into question. And there's due process for some of those things too. And I don't know how many people are aware of that, but there are some things in place too that help monitor or govern some of those issues already, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is if somebody is demonstrating that type of, I would say what you've described as overt resistance to, bias training or being racist or those things, and there's obligations for us already in place to report that.
Okay. For the sake of time, I do want to get to this last question, and then we will move to the open forum. With what happened with Aiden, it was very tragic, but the reporting around it was very very misunderstood by a lot of people, and upsetting for a lot of people as well. So I ask now in this last question, who writes the press releases and who decides what is important and what is not? What training does that person have in cultural sensitivity and implicit bias? Obviously, what we've seen out of Aiden's case, from making a murderer look pretty, nice, was very disturbing. So I don't know how much interaction you guys have with that, but I'm sure they have to come to you before they release their stories.
So again, I realize that a lot of this is speaking directly to stuff that I've been involved with recently. I wrote the news release in conjunction with the district attorney's office. Now, I'm not aware of the actual news release being, if somebody wants to point out to me that the news release itself was negatively received, I'd like to hear that, because I always want to learn.
What we saw, Chief, just to interject for a second, what we saw was, a murderer who was painted as a single father, a person that was misplaced because of the fires, neglecting the whole fact of what just really took place. And I think it was a little disturbing for a lot of people to see it in that context. This young kid who was just murdered, just very, very disturbing the way it was written.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I just want to gently and respectfully push back a little bit. That information, I don't believe, was in the news release. That is information that local media sources gleaned through their investigations. So if a local media source chooses to paint the picture of, this unfortunate single father displaced, and as you say, so forth and so on, I agree, that is really, really unfortunate, and it's misleading, and it is not framing this the way that it should have been framed. And I also know that there's one news outlet in particular that took my comments and then posted that this murder happened because of Aiden's loud music. And I never said that. And of course, I can't control the headline that the journalist writes. And of course, I think everybody can agree that journalists are going to write headlines that people are going to click on. I get that there's a lot of legitimate anger out there over it being represented that way. I have never represented it as any way other than 100% on Keegan, the suspect. His actions were totally out of bounds. He is 100% responsible for it.
Thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up, guys and gals. Thank you so much, officers. I would like to now move us into our open forum section. The community here will have a chance to ask some questions. I'm sure they have lots of responses and statements they would like to make at this time. Okay, so in this section, how this will work, will allow community members to respond directly to the panelists. You may turn your video on when asking your question. The rule for this is if you would like to say a comment, or if you have a question directly for the panelists, please put the word stack in the chat box, S-T-A-C-K. It's what we used last form, stack in the chat box. And I will call on you and you can ask your question or make your comment aloud. You only have 90 seconds. This is so we can move through as many people as possible. If you don't want to speak aloud, you can write your question in the chat box with the word stack before it, and I'll try to read it for you. There's a lot of people on right now, so I will try to get to as many as possible, but first come are going to be the people that just write stack that want to speak aloud. Please remember to indicate who you would like your question to be addressed to, because we don't have time for everyone to answer your question. So thank you, and the floor is now yours. All right. We have a question at this time. Clarence? Okay, Clarence.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. My only question is in 2018, case number 06-2806 FE, off of Ross Lane. I was jumped by 18 white supremacists, and I was put away by Detective Ford, Detective Ivins. And they talk about accountability. They sent me to a recognitive thinking program where I had to take accountability for being jumped by these individuals. And there was no repercussion for any 18 of those individuals. And those 18 individuals are in some pretty nice little places right now. And the officers involved as well. There's a whole lot I got to say, but I only got a little bit of time. The latest one was the house burning. Since we all know how tragic to lose your home is, I got some of your officers recorded on camera laughing about how they could have saved my house the night before from burning down. And they laughed about it on their personal phone calls on their body cam. I got it. And they're laughing about how my house burned and the dude did it and how they didn't do nothing. And Clausen, you did a review with the news person lady. So I guess my question would be to you. So for Black people as myself, what kind of accountability do you guys have for your officers and for all the stuff that you guys have done? Because you guys are kind of like, have a lot of dirt on your guys' rap sheet to Black people. Like, the case is very wide open. The case is very wide open. I even had the victims, even one of the people that jumped me, I fed him and his daughter at Hawthorne Park. So I meant the case is open. People all talk about it. And I like to see some accountability. And what do you guys plan on doing about stuff like that?
Thank you. Clausen, I think that's to you.
There was a lot there, Clarence. So it'd probably be best if you contacted me offline. We can talk about it. First, you talked about an 06 case, so we're going way back. So I'm happy to discuss with you and take a look at your particular complaints.
Okay, sounds like Clarence, you can contact Chief Clausen.
Nice dodge.
Okay, Aisha Wand. AISHA. He's letting you in now. I'll go ahead and ask a question before that. What are the demographics within each police department? How many Black police officers represent the city of Ashland, Medford, Talent, Phoenix, CP? Increasing diversity on each law enforcement team creates natural liaison opportunities. What is the active recruitment process for people of color in your departments? Anyone can take that?
I can talk for Central Point just really quickly. Is our demographics, I had them broken down, is we're more gender-based, and so I think we're at 14% female, the rest male. Demographics of race were not very diverse, and this is one of those things that I would like to ask the community for help on recruitment, because I do think it's very valuable. Law enforcement across the board is having a very difficult time recruiting, retaining good police officers and people who want to serve the community. And we're going to need help with that. So that's something that I actually would like help from the community on how to do that.
Okay. Aisha? You need to unmute, Aisha.
Uh-oh, I'm on mute.
You have to click the button.
There you are.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. We were talking about trust earlier and building trust within the departments and with the Black community. Just what steps are you willing to take? You know, trust is something you earn, and it's been a long time for us being in fear of police and living that way. So what steps are you willing to make to build that trust between your departments and the Black community here? There has to be steps made to be able to earn that trust.
let
I'll
anyone
just
take that.
real quick. Just, I got a real short answer, but I think the number one thing is just forums like this, where we can reach out to a community that we otherwise have heard from. So it's building connections like with Base and Vance and getting Vance and on our committees. That's where we establish trust and begin to build those relationships.
Aisha, I'm sorry. I would ask if you have any suggestions.
I mean, it's going to be a long road ahead, obviously, but I think within the departments, you know, spending the time to talk to more than just us within those departments, talking to the people who work in the departments and how they relate to the Black community, so that there's not like this instant barrier, you know. So within your departments, you're going to have to take that time and have meetings and multiple. I don't know exactly what those steps are, but it's going to take a lot of work, obviously. And I think that you really need to make that communication within your department actively.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha.
I would just add one thing, if I could, real quick, Vance and Aisha, is, hey, my door is always open. I know, you know, you're welcome. Anybody's welcome to come down, sit down, see our operation, have a chat, and we can start that way, just with a dialogue, and you can just meet who our deputies are and who we are, and we have an open door. So come down anytime you'd like, and visit, and just start building there too, along with all the other things that were said here, for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we have another question here. I'm going to read from a community member. The sheriff chiefs mentioned trainings and other tools to hold officers accountable, but I have two questions. Why is there such a huge disconnect between our officers' behavior and their chief sheriffs? Do these officers understand what you are telling us? And number two, how will any plans of action be effective given the huge amount of power possessed by the police union? I understand unions are important for worker rights, but this union particularly has exorbitant power. Thank you. Anybody know the answer to that?
I don't think anybody knows the answer to all of that. You know, I'm trying to navigate these conversations with the officers, and the officers, they think that they're doing their jobs, and in a lot of ways. And so it's a learning process for all of us, including the officers, to see that how they perceive their actions is not how the person being stopped perceives their actions. I will admit all day long that I am learning with every conversation I have. I'm learning how little I know, and the officers hopefully are learning as well. But it's not an easy fix for any of us, not for me, the other chiefs, or for the officers. It's going to be.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience and for holding on. I want to thank Base and Vance, everyone, all the members of Base. I want to thank the community as well for just inviting me back in to do another closing for this second forum, which is so very, very much important and needed during this time. I want to thank just everyone for hanging in there. This is a tough time for all of us, the police officers as well as the deputies. So I want to thank everyone for doing all that they can and hanging in there. So I want to move forward. I'm trying to, hold on a second. I'm just trying to see if I can get this echo out here.
Dr. Flora, you can turn your audio off on your computer, or you can turn it off completely if you like. Either way, we can hear your audio.
Okay. Okay, so
We are here again because we are working, the Black community. When I say we, I'm speaking of the Black community. We are working to break the historical mold that was established for police officers and sheriffs back in the mid-1800s. So that's why we find ourselves here with another forum. I would like to start off with a quote from an anonymous writer, and it states, "Men are respectable only as they respect." And I know that we have discussed respect tonight. And so I want us to be mindful of that quote. Police officers and deputies, in the mind of respect, will be respected when they establish trust with the Black community. The police officers and deputies will be respected when they establish trust within their own police departments and uphold integrity. Police officers and deputies will receive respect when they keep each other accountable for their actions. And they will be respected when they demonstrate good character, not only when they're wearing uniforms, but when they are in plain clothes in the community. Police officers and deputies will be respected when they can respect Black citizens as human beings, because nothing less will be tolerated. Police officers and sheriffs will be respected when they understand Black cultural norms. Now, I also have a message for our Black community and for the police officers as well to listen in. So for us in the Black community, we are still hurt and upset about commodious lies and we cannot come to an agreement until there is, like we heard tonight, transparency. We must agree to move on from these commodious lies and ways and establish ways to build our trust. Now, the Black community thinks that it should not be difficult for police officers and sheriffs to connect with us. At this day and age, it should not be a difficult task. It should not be difficult, we believe, to establish a sense of safety at home, a sense of safety while driving, and a sense of safety while moving about Jackson County on the streets. The Black community, we believe that it should not be difficult to receive equal respect as a Jackson County citizen. We do not believe these things should be difficult and unreasonable at this day and age. Now, someone during the question period asked about suggestion to the police. And I like what Chief Omar said, because he said he's welcome to suggestions, and that is a start. We can respect that. He said he's open to suggestions. And so we have a suggestion, which Vance mentioned tonight, and that is the liaison. Now, what is a liaison? A liaison is a person that will come and bring together either organizations, but they're working towards facilitating a good relationship. Now, we propose that these liaisons are not employed within the police departments of Jackson County. But we are in hopes that the liaison will be a problem solver, a good problem solver, will promote respect between Black community members and the police departments, will promote trust amongst the Black community and the police departments and the sheriffs, and will bridge a gap between the police departments and our Black community, as well as the sheriffs. In essence, we believe that the liaison will strengthen the community's partnership so that the whole community at large will feel safe and protected. Now, let's look at past liaisons, which we probably never thought about them as being past liaisons, but they were. Nelson Mandela, before he became the president of South Africa, he was a liaison. Martin Luther King, whom we're about to celebrate, was a liaison. And even though we might not be an official liaisons, we all can do our individual work in movements of liaison operations to help. So if they can change the slide, I'd like to get right to the commitments. Thank you. So we will go right to the commitments now. Because of time, I'm going to go right through them. And so the first commitment is support the creation and use of the liaison. This has already been brought up, but we want to verbalize it again, get that verbal commitment from Chief Allison. Do we have it?
Yes.
Do we have your verbal commitment, Sheriff Stickler, to support the creation and use of the liaison?
Yes.
And do we have your verbal commitment, Chief Clausen, to support the creation and use of a liaison?
Yes.
And Chief Amara, do we have your verbal commitment to support the creation and use of a liaison?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next commitment. And this is all in liaison operations to ID projects and areas where liaison could be helpful. So, Chief Amara, do you commit to that?
Yes.
Chief Clausen, do you commit to it?
Yes.
Sheriff Stickler, do you commit to that?
Yes.
And Chief Allison, do you commit to it?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The third commitment, to encourage police officers and deputies to utilize the liaison. So Sheriff Stickler, do you commit to doing that?
Yes.
Chief Allison, do you commit to doing that?
Yes.
And Chief Clausen, do you commit to doing that?
Yes.
Chief Amara, do you commit to doing that?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the fourth commitment. Liaison will play a substantial role in the formation of police policy. Chief Clausen, do you commit to that?
Yes.
To supporting that liaison and doing that, do you commit, Sheriff Stickler?
Yes.
And Chief Allison, do you commit to supporting the liaison in that role?
Yes.
Chief O'Mara, do you commit to supporting the liaison in that role?
It's hard to say anything but a yes to you, but I have to say yes within my power to do so.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so the last one on this list right here is to support the goal of creating an anti-racist culture within each police department in Jackson County. Now, this is very, very important because the atmosphere at each department has to be anti-racist, anti-prejudice. Chief Allison, do you support that culture being created?
Yes.
Sheriff Stickler, do you support that culture being created within your department?
Yes.
And Chief Clausen, will you commit to creating an anti-racist, anti-prejudice culture in your police department?
Yes.
And Chief O'Mara, will you as well join the others? Thank you. Will you change the slide now? Thank you for your commitments. We're almost there. As I read, I want you to read as well. Then this is talking about statistical operations of the liaison, and community members can read it as well. Each department will gain to set policies alongside the liaison in the community that will aim to reduce any statistical disparity by at least 50% within each calendar year until there is no disparity. Departments will agree to allow the liaison access to how statistics are input and kept to make sure that the information collected is as honest and accurate as can be. All departments agree that not reporting data required by the STOP program will lead to discipline for the officers involved, and agree to commit to keeping the best, most transparent statistics to show how good their practice are or what might need reform. Chief Allison, do you commit to this, to working with the liaison in this area?
Yes.
Do you, Sheriff Stickler?
Yes.
And do you, Chief Clausen?
Yes.
And Chief O'Mara, do you agree to work with the liaison? Thank you. We can change the slide. Liaison operations and oversight issues. This was mentioned before. The liaison will have monthly meetings with each other, the chief, and be allowed access to disciplinary files where legal and appropriate, and begin a voice and policy changes to the disciplinary process as well. So Chief O'Mara, do you agree to work with the liaison in this operation?
As is allowed by law and contractual issues, yes.
Okay, we appreciate that. Do you agree to work with the liaison in these operations, Chief Clausen?
I'm going to answer that carefully because I have to follow state laws. So I will absolutely be transparent. I want to, and this should be part of that process. But I also have to stay within my own judicial bounds.
Yes, and we wouldn't want anyone to have to compromise that. So thank you for that honesty. Chief Stickler, do you agree to work with the liaison in these operations?
Yeah, I would echo both chief statements as allowed by law and within our contractual obligations and all those natures. But yes, we will work with the liaison.
Thank you. And Chief Allison, do you agree to work with the liaison in these operations?
I do, yes. And I see in your writing on this, it does say when legal and appropriate.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Liaison and hate crime complaints. So the liaison will work in the area of hate crimes and complaints. Two departments agree to create a uniform process for how hate crime complaints are reviewed, investigated, and handled, utilizing the training they already have undergone and are agreeing to add on their current curriculum. Each department agrees to dedicate adequate resources to any such complaint in order to resolve the investigations and make any arrest or referrals for persecution with hate crime status in mind. Two departments agree to make strong statements against racism and hate crimes whenever those events arise in a community. And should the departments need additional resources, they will notify the liaison, who will help seek out additional funding to ensure that those complaints and crimes are investigated fully. The strategy for the value of the position for them. So as we read this, Chief Allison, do you agree to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Sheriff Stickler, do you agree to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chief Clausen, do you agree to work with the liaison in this hate crime complaint operation?
Those are all great strategies, and I wholeheartedly embrace them.
Thank you. Chief O'Mara, do you agree to work with the liaison that's appointed in this operation?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. We can change the slide. Liaison calls for service. So this is another operation of liaison. All parties agree to seek out grant funding for mental health and substance abuse treatment services, specifically for people of color, in order to make the response to these requests robust, along with the response to the needs and requests of the victims of hate crimes and other incidents. So again, Chief O'Mara, do you agree to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chief Clausen, do you agree to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. Sheriff Stickler, do we have your commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chief Allison, do we have your commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. We can change the slide. I believe there's one more here. Liaison operates on call to complain about law enforcement activities. That's another operation of liaison. The departments agree to create a uniform process for how those complaints from communities of color are reviewed, investigated, and handled. And then specifically, we are speaking again of the Black community. Each department agrees to dedicate adequate resources to any such complaint in order to resolve the investigation and impose any necessary discipline. And the third one, the departments agree to make strong statements against racism whenever those events arise in the departments. Should the departments need additional resources, they will notify the liaison, who will help seek out additional funding to ensure that those complaints are investigated fully. So this is the last one here. We want to get some strong commitments, and we'll start with Chief Allison. Do we have your strong commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. And Sheriff Stickler, do we have your strong commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. Chief Clausen, do we have your firm commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chief O'Mara, do we have your strong and deepest commitment to work with the liaison in this operation?
Yes, you do.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your commitments to the Black community, and we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you, everyone, and thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this historical meeting. I turn it back to Vance.
Thank you, Dr. Whit Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Flora, and thank you, officers, for those commitments. Those are very, very big commitments, and we're see nothing but great success coming from out of that. I'm very, very sorry to everyone that for the technical difficulties earlier. But with that said, going forward, our committee will work alongside our advisors and police leaders to develop this liaison team. This will be our last community forum in this way. We are expecting to bring in some highly qualified professional community liaisons where qualifications may include, but not limited to, community outreach and engagement, cultural agility training, emotional intelligence, research and development, data and statistic competency. Once we get down to a list of ideal candidates, we would like to ensure our community is engaged in the final selection process. This may be a few months out or more, but before positioning. However, this is a community position where the community's feedback and input will be vital. As we work through the details of the role, final candidates selections will be sent to the community for input, if not introduced for meetings and or interview questions. In the meantime, our committee will continue to work with our officers. Please make sure you have subscribed to our baseoregon.org website so you can receive the updates, and make sure you continue to follow us at Base Oregon Facebook page. We want to be sure to keep you updated along the way. We also will post the full details of the role and commitments made today from law enforcement in a letter on our baseoregon.org website. And if you have any questions, or if you know of any potential candidates for the liaison role, or even would like to join us, please contact us. I think we should have our information up here for Base Oregon. Also, the full recording for this forum will be on our YouTube and Facebook page at Base Oregon, where we reposted Form 1 and we will now post Form 2. And lastly, let me just say we have huge plans for 2021 that will include things like our MLK Challenge, networking events once COVID cools down, economic workshops, youth education program will expand much larger, and we are having a huge summer concert with the Brit Festival later in the summer. So much more to look out for with us. Also, support Black businesses on our website. We have a long list of them, and we hope to include more. We want to promote them. We want to support them. And I'll end with saying thank you again to all of our chiefs and our sheriff. Especially thank you to the community members that are here still. We look forward to a thriving Southern Oregon community, and we'll see you guys next time. With power.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Song.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.